Mic check, 1, 2. Welcome to Hustletown Live.
What up, world? Your boy Infamous Tex, man, and we back again with another episode of Hustletown Live, and it's a special one right here, right? Because I got a legend in the house with me, man, a Southeast legend that we're gonna be chopping up game. We'll be talking about his story real quick. Sambo, go on, let him know what's up, man.
We here tonight on the Hustletown Network. We're gonna spit a little bit of game, chop it up, drop some gems, and hopefully the things that we share tonight, man, we could take it and run with it and keep them as building blocks.
That's right. Y'all stick around, man. It's about to go down. Back again. Hustletown Live, man, from the world famous Compound Films right here in downtown H-Town. And it's going down, like I said, something really special right here, man. I've been waiting to chop it up with my guy right here. From what I hear, I'm one of the first guys that gets to chop it up with you on a live interview.
Already, this is the first interview I did since I came home after doing 29 years in prison. So,
Damn.
we're gonna sit back, we're gonna chop it up tonight and share some things that nobody really knows in terms of what I'm doing or what's going on or what I've been through.
Right on, man.
Exclusive content, that's what it is, exclusive content.
That's right, man. 29 years. Wow. Sambo, that's a long time.
Already.
29 years. Was there ever a point in that you felt like you weren't ever going to come out?
Oh, of course. When I got locked up, prison was filled with extreme violence.
Right.
You didn't know if you were gonna live or die. So it was what it was, and I thank God first and foremost for allowing me to get through it all, and the support that I got from the people that I love the most. Especially my wife, family members, close friends. Because when you're in the thick of it, you sitting there in that octagon in that concrete jungle, and you don't know if you're gonna live or die. That's what you cling on to, the love and support that you get from the people that love you the most.
That's right. Hey, that's real right there, man. Hey, so I'm seeing what you're doing now from just being out in just such a short time. You've already done a lot of stuff, doing stuff for the community and everything. But let's back up. Let's talk about the very beginning, man, where it all I guess started for Sambo. Obviously from the southeast of H-Town. Let me know some of the. I guess let's talk about the upbringing, man, just in Southeast in general. What early '90s, '80s. What does it really go back to, man? When Sambo became Sambo.
Probably, I jumped off the porch about 86, 85, 86, 87. Jumped out the porch and went straight to work. My upbringing wasn't what most people would say was stable. I grew up in a single parent household, hit the streets running. I was trying to do everything that I could possibly do to survive and help those that I love the most, get through it as well.
Right.
Most of us, we grow up in a situation where it's not economically sound and it's not conducive to positive growth and development. So, we hit the streets running. I had to become a man before my time, but somewhere along the line, my pain became everybody else's pain.
Right. Man. So Southeast, pretty much born and raised out there in the Southeast side, right? What side of town exactly, or what side of Southeast would you say was your hood?
In Grand Oak Park.
In Grand Oak Park.
In Grand Oak Park.
The legendary in Grand Oak Park
Southeast.
too.
Already.
That's right, man. You kind of basically put the Southeast on the map, bro. A lot of people say you put the Southeast on the map. How do you feel about that?
Well, it's a blessing and a curse.
Right.
Because sometimes, man, we're born into it. We ain't necessarily sworn into it.
Right.
And there was times in my life that the burden that I carried, with the streets that was behind me and the momentum that picked up in the early 90s, it was something that I'm not going to say that I didn't really want, because at that point in my life I had been emboldened by the sacrifice that I was making for the streets. But you can be surrounded by all the people, but at the same time, and you can still feel alone and lost, because there's other things deep within yourself that you want to accomplish.
Right.
But it was what it was, and we did what we did, and it was an era, it was a space and time where you know, if I could have did it different, I probably would have.
Right.
You know, sometimes the streets just get a hold of us, and it is what it is. You know, and I'm just grateful that God brought me through it, and I'm alive today just to live and share what it is, my personal experiences, the negative consequences as well as the positive ramifications that have come about, you know, with everything that I've been through.
And we just had a cop siren pass the building right now. I ain't gonna lie, man, and it just sounded like there's some sound effects going on towards some of the stuff you're talking about, man. Because this is real street stuff, man.
Yeah.
Can I give a shout out to all the people
Oh,
that
yeah.
are commenting, showing love? I just want to
Yeah, let's shout them out. Let's shout them out.
So we have El Tio, Blessings, Julio Vasquez, Living Proof, G-Man, Misty, El Christopher,
Shout out El Christopher.
Samuel Jurado.
Relentless.
He says, I love you, Michael Bradley, my brother, Marco, Angie Ruiz. He says, God bless. Southeast, Anna Figueroa says, Southeast legend. Michael Bradley, he says, cold. Adam Medina, put a cross. Trey Hayes, tell him, Sambo. Samitra, grateful you came through. Evelyn, 100.
Sambo getting a lot of love right here.
A lot.
Probably more comments than most of the other people we have on so far. I ain't gonna lie, man. Hey, the streets love Sambo. Man, do you ever miss the 90s? Do you ever like reminisce, I guess, on some of the stuff back then?
Yeah, it was a certain space and time, man, that kind of brought the culture here in Houston and solidified it with the music, with the street element. You know, back then when rappers was putting out music, you had to have the streets behind you.
Right.
You know, to certify
Right.
what particular projects came out. You know, Grimm, he had dropped Making the Matter Worse. You know, he's the first Texas living legend right now, man, that dropped the first music for the Latinos, and I was right there in the middle of it.
That's right.
You know, they was putting out music, man, and I was staying in lick, so it all coincided with each other at the same time, and it solidified their project, you know, and you know, the 90s.
You did some of the artwork too on that one, right?
Oh yeah, I did a Grimm CD when he came out with that Grimm Productions. You know, Shadow, the OG, Ike Man, Lil Villain, all them brothers right there. They day one. You know, we was all in the same circle together, but I was on the street on the front line, man, and them brothers was in the sound booth making music. You know, putting it out there.
Right. Wow. Can you give us some memories, some of the memories, I guess, of the early Houston rap game? Of course, you were just saying, you know, Grimm, Shadow. What were some of the artists out there back then, man? I mean, I know at the beginning it was mainly we just had Ghetto Boys, and we started getting into, you know, Street Military, Grimm. What were some of the other people that you knew out there, or just what was the music scene like in the, you know, in that time? I guess early '90s when it was really starting to kick off with y'all guys.
Yeah, well, you know, like Grimm, like I said, you know, he was at the forefront. A lot of people, they don't give him the credit that he deserves.
True.
They don't get the recognition that he deserves.
That's
you know,
right.
Shadow, they're the brothers that built the movement early on. You know, they're the ones that gave birth to South Park Mexican. They're the ones that gave birth to Lil Bing. They're the ones that, you know, they stirred up the pot and they brought it to the forefront. They let it know that them dreams of being a rapper, a musician, that they were possible. You know, they were dropping music, they were making moves, and they were just sharing their story based on their personal experiences. And, you know, I mean, I remember we was at Shadow's house. He had a wall mic in his closet, you know, and they were putting together their music, man. And you know, one of the things that I love about the 90s was back then that brothers was coming from the heart.
Right.
They were telling stories. They were making music.
Right.
You know, they were composing beats and lyrics together, and they were sharing the story of what was going on in terms of the struggle at that particular time period, because, you know, everything came together at that moment, and it was like the perfect storm. You know, it was the perfect storm, man, and, you know, sometimes we was out there putting this stuff out there and we were promoting it and not necessarily realizing it was a detriment to our community, that we were causing more harm than anything else. But it was what it was, a time and space at that particular moment. The early 90s, man, you know, it was, you know, I mean, it's something that you would have to, you know, just share in vivid detail, man. I mean, there was clubs that was going on back then like Zaz, you know, the Palladium. I mean, there was all kind of artists. You had Bam, Tila, you had Crime Boss. You know, you had other brothers that was out there making moves, man. You know, they was out there just just sharing their personal experiences, believing in that dream that it was possible.
Right.
You know, that's why I got behind them brothers, man, and I always sat back, man, and put the streets behind them because I knew, man, that even if nobody believed in their dreams, I knew they were able to, make it manifest in their lane,
Right.
and they have, and they're still relevant till this day. And there's a lot of rappers out here in this world that are living their dreams, and they don't necessarily know their history. So it's
Right.
very important that they know the history.
That's
You
true.
know,
That's true. That's real. While you were in prison, were you able to keep up with a lot of what was going on out here as far as the way Houston was starting to advance in the music scene and all that, or was this something that you got caught back on once you got out? Like, how was it in there with
well,
everybody doing their
a
thing?
lot of the content in the music, that a lot of these brothers was putting out. I would write lyrics for them,
Hmm.
give them concepts for their albums. I would share different insights, what was going on inside of the concrete jungle, and my personal experiences. And a bunch of them, they kept my name alive by giving me shout outs in their music. And I give a salute to all them brothers that kept my name alive while I was locked up. Even the younger generation, like Lil Young from Swisher House.
Right.
Some of the brothers from Wolfpack. Um, SPM and his music. Them brothers gave me shouts out and kept my name alive while I was locked up.
Hmm. Wow. How did you meet SPM?
We grew up together.
Okay.
Yeah, I've been knowing him, man, way before the rap music, way before, you know, uh, he even believed in himself.
Hmm.
Even before he was on the mic. We just grew up together. I've been knowing them brothers probably about 35, 40 years, going on 40 years. And shout out to SPM, man. I know that there's a lot of controversy surrounding his name, but I know that he created a lane for a lot of brothers, you know, out here, to believe in their dreams as well. Whatever he got to deal with, his personal struggles, man, I pray and hope that, he can overcome and build on his momentum.
That's right. Man, yeah, there's been all kinds of stuff that, man, since 29 years, you can just imagine how Houston has changed. So when you came
Right.
out, seeing Houston the way it is now, what was your first, how was it like when you first got out, man? Got to see everything and meet everybody again, and tell me a little bit about that.
Well, a lot of the solid brothers, man, have kept in touch with me. My wife, she was so consistent in her love and support. She always kept me plugged in. Always sent me pictures, came to visit me every weekend, let me know what was going on, so that way I wouldn't get lost in the system.
Right.
So I kept tabs, man, and brothers reached in. Shout out to Pancho V from Salty Water Records. He'd come visit me with my wife. Always pick up the phone when I call him. Other brothers as well. They stayed plugged in with me, and just it allowed that hope to stay alive. There's a lot of people that are locked up right now, man, that people don't reach out to.
Right.
So I encourage anybody out there right now that's looking, that if you got somebody that's locked up, reach back, plug in with them, keep that hope alive, man, because it's real easy to get lost in the system. At one point in time, I had got lost, and I got so deep in the game in prison that I didn't know if I was ever gonna make it out.
Wow. How long have you been married?
I've been married going on 6 years now. But my wife, she kept in contact with me since 1994, 26 years. Basically she waited for me.
Wow.
But she waited till I grew up. Basically, I was so in depth in that gang culture while I was locked up. She wasn't really trying to commit, but when she seen the positive changes that I was making while I was incarcerated, then she says, she couldn't let me go.
Wow.
She couldn't let me go. She held on to me. She, more so than
Beautiful.
anybody, she seen my potential.
Yeah.
She seen my potential, man, and sometimes we need that.
That's right.
And she was right there at the right moment, man. 26 years, man. She kept in contact with me, and I came home, man, and she was right there waiting on me, and we've been building, we've been running ever since.
That's
We
right.
ain't stopped yet, and we ain't gonna stop.
Beautiful. I've been seeing all the work y'all been doing, bro. I mean, big salute, man, for everything y'all are doing. Y'all two as a team too. That's the beauty of it, man. Like
Right.
you embrace, the marriage, and I've seen some of the game that you talk to some of our younger cats out here too, and it's beautiful, man. While you were in there, you talked to me a while back when we were working on something over at 97 on the box. You were telling me about some of the stuff that you did while you were in there, as far as on the art side, because you're very artistic. where did it all start from? Did it start kind of in the early days, more on the graffiti side, and it kind of turned into more? I remember you were talking about kind of doing some murals and stuff, even in the prison system. Where did all that start from?
Well, I did a total of 11 years in administrative segregation. That's lockup, where you come out the cell only 1 hour a day. You come out, you're handcuffed, you're shackled. They put you in from one cell into a cage. You get to spend, an hour in there if they have the staff to bring you out. So I stayed in that type of under them type of living conditions for 11 years. And while I was in that box, I had to take an introspective look. First thing I did was I reached out to God and I solidified my relationship with Jesus. And he gave me that power. He gave me that strength to deal with that type of adversity, to overcome that particular living conditions, what I would refer to as subhuman living conditions. I wouldn't put an animal in them type of living conditions, but the way that I was living my life, the Texas prison system didn't have no choice, and but I reached out to God, man, and He let me know that if I put my faith in Him, that I'm able to overcome. So I tapped into my personal talents. God gives us talent, He gives us time, and He gives us resources. So I tapped into my talent, and I utilized the time that was at my disposal, and now I turn them into treasures. So I reached up in there, man, and just started, taking an introspective look in who I really was, and the things that I had to offer. And the art, I was already drawn for all the brothers out here on the streets, and
Right.
putting together different pieces and tattooing in the penitentiary. But I came home, man, and I set up magic hand murals, and started running and started painting. Did some stuff for you at 97.9 The Box, man. Did some stuff for Jessica Jeans at her after school program as well. And just been running the city, man, putting in work, trying to revitalize different projects, different areas, because it's needed.
Right.
Some people need to understand that we all got talent. We all have the ability to give back, but being in them type of living conditions right there in prison, you have to reach deep within yourself. And you got some of the most greatest artists that are locked up, and they're in there, and they're surviving off of their artwork. They're surviving off of their music, their writing, their literary compositions. They're just making it happen. Penitentiary ingenuity and faith in God, and proving to the people that love and support them the most that they're able.
Right.
Because for a lot of people, it's just a watch, wait, and let's see what, how it unfolds. But it's a whole different world within the world,
Right.
being locked up. You talked about, the 90s, how it was out here, what I remember. But we also have to remember, man, that it all coincides with each other, because prison is just a microcosm of what's going on out here in the streets.
Right.
What goes on out here goes on in there. And if anything, it's even more so compounded under them type of conditions, because you're in there and there's nowhere to go. It's like you're living in an invisible maze. So,
True.
the main thing that I remember about the 90s was people were tapping into their talents. They believed that their dreams were possible, but also the violence, how it cut so many people short, or the hustle. It cut so many people short from actually living out their full potential. Like they say that the graveyard is the most wealthiest place on the planet, because most people die before they even live out their full potential.
Damn.
So it is what it is, and a lot of brothers didn't make it. But for those of us that have made it, it's very important that we give back. Not that we relive that or try to recap it, but we share our experiences. That way we can educate other people, not only about the fact that if you believe in your dreams, there's actual longevity, but that if you believe in your dreams, man, that, it'll give you a means to the end to survive the current situation, whatever it is that you may be trapped in, whether it's poverty, whether it's an educational issue that you're dealing with, or
Right.
single parent households, whatever the case may be. It runs the gamut in terms of negative, aspects that are woven deep within our communities. But we lived it, and not only did we live it, we learned from it. So it's our duty to give back and educate others, and that's what I'm trying to do. The 90s, man, it was a terrible era for us in Houston,
Right.
And
Yeah.
I think that it's coming back full circle, because a lot of people nowadays, they don't put value on life. They're living in the moment.
That's
So it's
true.
very important and very urgent for us that know, to share that truth with those that are coming up, or those that are on the front line living that particular lifestyle, or just believing in their dreams.
Shout out. Who we got?
Samitra, she said, you want me to read some of the
Yeah.
comments?
Yep.
Okay, perfect.
Go ahead and read that for us right quick.
All right.
Let's check in with
So,
everybody.
Samitra says, you've been blessed with creative talents and you share them with others. Fabian says, much love, Sambo. Michael Briley says, come on, somebody, Jesus. Melinda says, we're out in West Texas, Odessa, Texas. Your Thea, Melinda Martinez.
Hey, shout out West
Misty,
Texas.
God bless y'all so much. Samila, 6 years. Marco, 100. Anna Figueroa is listening from Southeast, Telephone Road. Latrell says, Latrell Seals is watching. And love from San Antonio, from Iowa, Southeast and Grand Oak Park, San Antonio, Pasadena, and more.
It's happening from everywhere. Y'all be sure to keep leaving some comments. If you have any questions, go ahead and ask them on there. And, of course, let us know where you're tapping in from. We're live right now. If you're just tuning in, live with the legend himself from Southeast H-Town, my boy Sambo. We're about to go to a quick commercial break real quick. But y'all stick around because we got some more questions. And we'll be right back.
Launching your brand new TV show or podcast should not be that hard. Let the professionals do the hard part while you focus on being a star. This is Compound Films, located in the Skyline District of downtown Houston. You can book us today on peerspace.com.
Directed by the world-famous Compound Films.
Man, welcome back. Hustletown live right here at the world-famous Compound Films. Again, if you're just tapping in, man, I'm with the legend himself, Sambo, out that Southeast right here. The guy who put Southeast on the map, man. If you're an artist out here in H-Town, especially a Latin artist, Mexican artist, you definitely got to tap in and know who Sambo is and what he's out here doing for the community today. About a question that, a lot of people have had, I guess there's been different versions of exactly what Sambo, was locked up for, all that. But I want to hear it, I guess, from you yourself as the stories or how'd you get into the situation you got into that got you in there for 29 years?
Well, I went to prison for a murder I didn't do. I didn't do it. I just stuck to the G code. They say don't snitch. You got to take your lick, and you gotta deal with the consequences.
Right.
And that's what I did at that particular moment. The district attorneys, law enforcement community, everybody wanted me to, just expose everything that took place. But, I feel like, at that particular moment, the mindset that I had was, this is what it is. This is how you have to deal with it. And the consequences, whatever it may be, you have to bear the brunt of that burden, So, I took the fall for a murder I didn't do. That's why so many brothers that was in the game at that time when music barely started out, they started promoting me. They started putting it out there because they know the truth. The streets don't, the streets talk.
Right.
And, so I wrote it out. I had 2 35-year sentences, 327 months federal. So I dealt with it. I thought I was never going to come home, but, God had a plan for me from the beginning, from the onset. Sometimes you got to go through things to grow through them.
Right.
It's just part of life, man. Some things, but you have to maintain your composure. You can't just give up. You have to ride out the storm, man, because it's not going to last forever. If you stay consistent with it and you persevere, you're going to overcome because
Right.
you're going to get stronger as you go. That's just how it is, man. You tap into to your faith. You see the people that you have around you that support you, and you just run with it. You can't give up, and there was days that I was in prison, and I would think, hey, man, I'm going to stick to the G code, and this is what it is, and I'm still sticking to the G code to this day, but that's God's code. That's what I'm doing now,
Right.
But it is what it is, man, and, I can't make up for the time that I spent while I was incarcerated, but while I was in there, I made a whole bunch of promises to the people that love and support me, and I told them, look, I'm not going to get bitter, I'm going to get better. There was things that took place while I was locked up. I had to jump on the front line and, still put in work, but that's the way it is. I took
Right.
Southeast to the penitentiary and put H-Town on my back and ran with it as well while I was locked up, one of the founding members of the Thongo Blast, one of the original horsemen. And there was brothers that were there with me on the front line, man, that I put my life in their hands. And we rode it out through the thick of it in the early 90s when things was, full-fledged prison wars while we were locked up. And, there's a lot of brothers, man, that I could count on while I was locked up. And, God, yes, first and foremost, that's why I'm here to this day. But a lot of them brothers, man, I had my life in their hands.
Wow.
And that's why I'm alive to this day, because I was a walking target, because I was the one that was promoting it. I was the one that was putting it out there for the city, putting it out there for the state, letting these brothers know, man, we don't bar none. We're going to fade all regardless, man. We're not going to be no victims. We ain't doing nothing other than trying to get home to the people that love us the most, man. And, it turned into some things that I can't really touch base on right now because it's so in-depth, man, and some of the stuff is still going on to this day, but, I appreciate and love and respect them brothers, man, that I could count on when I hit a new unit. They were my gunners. They were putting on for the city as well, man, it's a whole different culture, a whole different mindset, and some people don't understand it, but, big shout out to them brothers, man, that I could count on while I was on lockup. That took care of me and helped me come home, man, because it was do or die at that particular time, man, while I was locked up in the early 90s and the mid 2000s. Right. Things started slowing down about 2010, 2011, 2012, man, but I was grateful for them brothers, and I have some solid relationships with them, and sometimes people don't understand what goes on behind prison walls, the relationships, the bonds that are fortified, because, it's all about survival sometimes in there. Right. And if you ain't careful, you're not going to make it home. They're going to take you off account. I did my time. I stuck to the G code, kept it 1,000 all the way around. But while I was in there, I realized, me and my wife, we'd have conversations. Me and my mother, we'd have conversations about, like, what are you going to do when you come home? How are you going to live your life when you come home? So, I started jumping into different programs, a faith-based dorm. I started realizing my value, started taking a bunch of classes, victim impact programs, cognitive intervention programs, started reaching out to city officials, started writing articles, man, about the gang culture, about what we can do to bring about solutions to this never-ending, epidemic, this crisis that's going on out here in the city and throughout the country, where people are losing their life before their time. So started grinding, started mentoring, started facilitating programs on lock, started putting together different curriculums, and came home. Today I work for the Mayor's Office of Gang Prevention and Gang Intervention.
Man.
I'm on a city tour right now of all the schools in HISD, and trying to educate the youth, man, about the consequences of gang violence and gun violence.
Right.
Right.
Man, I've been seeing that too, man. You're doing a hell of a good job, man. Again, big salute to you, your wife, everybody, your team, everybody who's rocking with you on what you're doing. Around what year was that when you started to make that shift from the old Sambo, I guess, to the new Sambo?
About 2010.
That's what 2010. Okay. And what? Because I know we're gonna have some so a couple of viewers that are gonna watch even from believe it or not, they still watch it even in the penitentiary. We get people that will tap in and
Yeah.
What prisons were you at, or which ones, like throughout the time, which ones were you at for those who don't know or just watching?
I did most of my time on Beto 1, Cofield, Stell Unit. The administration used to ship me from unit to unit when I was doing wrong, and then when I started doing right, they did the same thing, because they knew that I had a G pass, basically, because everybody accepted me, for who I was when I started making the positive changes, because I had that street credibility. So they would send me to different units to try to, change the culture of those particular institutions, try to quell the gang violence, try to minimize the gang membership, and just try to maintain the peace and get people enrolled in all these different ITP programs, so that way they can, do the adjustments that they needed, the modifications that they needed to come out here to the streets and be an asset as opposed to a liability. So I've taken that format from what I was doing in there out here, from going from unit to unit, cell block to cell block in there. Now I'm going block to block out here in the city, neighborhood to neighborhood, school to school, wherever they allow me to speak and share my testimony and my insight on what we can do to try to get a hold of what's going on right now and educate the youth and the community as a whole so we can work together, to try to minimize all this violence that's running so rampant in our city right now.
Man, I'm telling you, man, that's real. What would you tell a younger Sambo if you're able to talk to yourself back in the '90s? What would be some of the stuff you would tell your younger self?
That you got value, that you can be anything in the world that you want to be. Don't believe that the situation in which you're being raised, the economic situation, the family challenges that we have to deal with, whatever the case may be, I would tell Lil Sambo, hey, you got value. You can be anything in this world that you want to be. You just might have to go through some things to get there. And I always say, don't just go through it, grow through it, And I wish that I would have had somebody back then, a mentor, somebody that I could count on that could relate to me.
Right.
That I could tap in with and we can have them interpersonal relationships. My mother, she tried her best, but it's real difficult. Most of us grow up in single parent households. The mother has to take on the role of the father because the father is not there. So big shout out to the fathers out there taking care of their business as well. The ones that are present, not the ones that are just buying presents, but the ones that are taking care of their business and help raising their kids and respecting the mothers that brought them children into the world. So big shout out to them. Big shout out, a matter of fact, big shout out to my mother as well. I love you. She was there for me. One of the hardest things for me in prison, man, was to watch my wife and, our daughter and my mother leave visitation. That was one of the most difficult things for me to deal with. I lost my sister, Lisa, my twin, my ace Deuce while I was incarcerated. That was another difficult moment for me as well. But those challenges, they just made me stronger. They inspired me. They motivated me to come out here and get on the forefront. Right. And do the things that I need to do, man, for the city because, there's so much untapped, potential out here.
That's right.
I go into these schools and I speak to these kids, man, and I see it in their eyes. I feel their pain.
Right.
I feel their pain, and I know the struggle is real because, that's life, right? We all struggle. Right. But just like the struggle is real, I know that the victory is real as well.
Right.
So, sometimes we're going to go through different seasons in our life, and we may feel like we're going to give up or we're not going to be able to achieve the things that our hearts desire. But you keep that faith in God. You trust in the people that love and support you the most. And you build on that. You keep rocking out, man. You run it up. You don't give up. You keep believing. A believer and a doubter, that don't coincide with each other. You're either one or the other.
Right.
And I'm a living testament that sometimes you have to wait a little bit longer than you think you got to wait. I waited 30 years to come home and to live out my dream, to be a father, to be a husband, to be a business owner, to be an advocate for the community, to be a voice for the voiceless. I had to wait, but not only wait, I had to endure. A bunch of the kids in our communities today, they wake up in the morning and they feel like there's no way out.
Right.
Their father's not there. Their family condition is unstable. They don't even want to go to school because they don't have the right clothes to wear or the shoes on their feet that they need, that they think that's going to get them up in there. And it's a situation that shouldn't be there because kids, that, and I know that, we can both agree on this, and everybody else, I think, that no child should have to deal with grown-up issues, right?
Right.
I was speaking at a school the other day, and I asked all of them, man, if there's anything in the world that you can tell me why everybody's strapped up to this day, why everybody's packing in the schools, why everybody's, in the hood packing and strapped up, everybody wants to extendo, everybody wants to drum, right? What is it? What is it? It's more than just fascination, right? And they all told me that they want it because it's for protection. And no 13-year-old, no 14-year-old, no 15-year-old, man, should wake up in the morning and say, hey, man, I need a Draco, I need an extendo, I need a drum, man, because I'm walking to middle school and I need some protection.
Right.
As a community, we have a personal responsibility, man, to make schools a safe haven, a sanctuary to where kids can prosper in the community. You know, where I live at, you know, I want my grandkids out there. I want my daughter to play out there and not have to worry about getting shot. And I know the firsthand because, you know, I lived that particular lifestyle and I promoted it. So I understand the consequences and the severity of it, the magnitude of it, you know.
Right.
So we all have a personal responsibility as a community, man, to make our communities, our neighborhoods, our apartment complexes, our school conducive to positive growth and development, you know.
Very true, man. So, shit. Hey, I'm telling you, look, after this is over, y'all definitely got to rewind back and listen to everything Sambo just said, especially to all my young artists out there. You know, I'm seeing the music videos all the time. Of course, we're still seeing, you know, I remember back in the day, most of the videos, they were made for like TV. Now, because of YouTube, social media, it's a lot more explicit. You're seeing a lot more guns, a lot more drugs, everything kind of exposed on there. You know, what you're touching on right here is something that I feel like a lot of artists really need to hear this stuff, because a lot of artists, they go through, I guess, this a part of our life where, you know, eventually we make that 360 turn sometimes. But, man, if we can avoid that or get artists or people in general just at a young age more in this type of mind frame, I think we would have a better Houston for sure.
Most artists, they're just living out their, you know, their image.
Right.
They
That's
become
true.
a prisoner of their own image.
Right.
You know, and I understand that, you know, because that's what happened to me. We adopt this false persona and we accept it as though it's the truth. But in actuality, it's falsehood. We're living a lie, right?
Right.
But sometimes this is the only means to an end. Where would we be if we didn't have rap music?
Right.
For most of the guys that are in the game right now, they'd probably be dead or incarcerated, because it provides from a legitimate avenue, a legitimate means to the end to
Right.
make their money. But my message to all the rappers out there right now, and I deal with rappers on all levels of the game, you know, on a very, very consistent basis, and I'm very transparent with them. You know, my message to all the rappers is this: be more responsible. Understand your demographic and your market. You know, you're very influential, you know, to some of these children out here, and you have to be very, very careful, you know, and it's a fine line between artistry, real life, and promoting a certain lifestyle.
Right.
You know, it's a very fine line. So it's up to the managers, it's up to the people that they have in their circle, man, to say, hey, you know what, this is art. You know, it don't have to mimic real life in the present, but it is what it is. You know, these are props. You know, this is just a story that we're telling based on our personal experience. You know, and it's going to take a collective effort. You know, and I believe that, you know, at one point in time, there were people in the city, and you know, they felt like I didn't have a seat at the table. But I believe that the rappers, they have a seat at the table as well.
Right.
Their voice and their contributions to the community, because sometimes the kids, that's the only people that they have to idolize.
Right.
That's the only people that they have to look out to. You know, shout out to brothers like Trey the Truth and these other rappers that are out here, like with the Relief Game, putting in work. Shout out to Wolfpack. You know, Wolfpack, they do a lot of contributions in their neighborhoods where they grew up at, you know. Brothers like you as well. You know, you're out here, Zero. I mean, you know, it runs the gamut when it comes to all the rappers that are giving back. But just always remember how much influence you have.
Right.
You know, look at Bun B, man. He gets out here and he does his thing, man, with the community as well. It don't stop, you know. But we have to understand, man, that it's very, very critical at this particular time period to educate the masses from the difference between artistry and, you know, promoting this particular culture, man, that's causing our children to die before their time. You know, it's really important. You know, and I believe that they have a seat at the table. Believe me, you know. I know that it's sometimes, like I said, it's the only legitimate means that they have to get at their certain economic situation.
Right.
You know, they make movies in Hollywood about, you know, gangsters all day long. And sometimes I feel like the rappers are targeted, but I understand why. You know, the streets and the rap game sometimes, man, they're so close together that you can't tell the difference between, you know, the streets
Right.
and the artistry behind it. But hip hop, man, where would we be if we didn't have rap music? A lot of brothers would be dead or in jail, right?
It's true.
So shout out to all the rappers out there, man, that are doing their thing legitimate. You know, if you have any type of criminal element up in it, hey, man, tamper it down. You know, slow it down a little bit, man, and sit back and do some reflection. Get with your people and figure out how you can, you know, put it all together to where, you know, you can educate the youth, man, as you know, as opposed to giving them a negative influence, man. Give them all the right words that they need, man, to get out here and become an asset to the community as opposed to a liability.
Man, Man, that's real. You know, something you were saying too about the rappers and kind of living in that persona after a while. One thing that 50 Cent actually talked to me about one time, he was talking about, he was saying that it is a lot easier for rappers to become actors, right? Because you've seen a lot of rappers do that. They'll transition from the music to the acting stuff because it's kind of something you already do by nature as a musician, as an artist, because of that persona that you're living by, right? When you're this certain character, you know, you're not Curtis, you're 50 Cent when you're out and about, especially when you're around a lot of other gangsters, right? But when you're back, you know, chilling at home, whatever, you can be Curtis and be, you know, shut up, bitch, and da-da-da, go back and forth with your partners, but you can't really do that out in the streets when you're 50, right? And so I feel like that's very true on what you just touched on right there with the artistry, and I just feel like maybe if more artists become basically more real with themselves on a lot of the stuff that you're speaking on right here, I feel like, man, again, a better Houston, a better place, a better rap game here, rap scene here in the city.
Right. I spent New Year's with the Wolfpack, right? AD, Jaime the Young Don, Brick, all them brothers over there at their compound, and they're very family oriented.
Yes, sir.
But you see the videos, and you know, you see all this stuff going on, and you would think, man, otherwise.
Right.
But they've been able to separate it for the most part. You know, when it comes to the things that they got going on. And, you know, I commend them for that, you know, and the contributions that they make for the community. You know, I work real close, you know. Since I've been home, I've been able to start a couple of businesses and take it running. Right now we have 311 Studios. I got Manic Beats in the house with us. We got Shadow the OG, and I got the tattoo studio going on as well. So I deal with rappers on a day-to-day basis, man. I was chopping it up with Mr. Never Die Tonight and G-Love and Manic, you know, and I was sharing with them, man, that, you know, always stick to the script.
Right.
Remember, man, this is business. Right. You know, this is business, man. And, you know, we have a personal responsibility, man, to get out here and educate the masses. That's just what it is, you know. And that's my message to everybody. You know, that's my message to the players, the dope boys, the gangsters, everybody else. We're going to go through our phases and our stages in life, but it don't always have to be that way. You know, it's a natural progression. You talked about 50, right? Right. And I commend him for the things that he's done and what he's doing right now and the things that he's going to do in the future, right? But we have the same talent pool. We have the same head knowledge here in H-Town. You know, our thing is to circumvent all the negativity, right, and tap into the talent to get with brothers like you that know the business, you know, and utilize it to its full capacity. There's no reason why we shouldn't be eating at that level as well, right, you know. And I honestly, truly believe that Houston, being the most diverse city in the United States of America, we have everything that we need right here. We just have to remember, man, that when you get involved in all this negativity, then, you know, you got the law enforcement community that's going to shut it down. Right. You know, so if we want to continue to grow and we want to continue to flourish as a city, then we all have that personal responsibility that I continue to talk about, man, to keep everything at a minimum. Things are going to happen, you know, it's just what it is, you know. Life on the streets, the game, it is what it is. But if you can keep it at a minimal and understand, man, that there are people that are coming behind us, a future generation, and that we have to instill in them the proper principles, the proper etiquette, the proper insight in terms of business and the know-how, and let them know that they don't have to go to prison for 30 years. They don't have to go to death row. They don't have to die before their time. They don't have to give up on their dreams, you know. There's three types of people in this world: those that think about doing something, those that talk about doing something, and those that actually do it. Right. You know, Houston, we did it. With the swangers, with the candy paint, with the syrup, with the chopped and screwed. We did it, right? We created the momentum. We created the culture, right? Yep. So why stop midway? You know, why not keep growing? Why not keep plugging in and putting the pieces together, right? You know, you show these brothers that are in the room with me tonight, right? Mello, shout out to Mello, the jeweler, for coming out with me tonight. My nephew, AD, you know, for coming out. But it's the young brothers that are the future. You see, we can get so caught up in the moment, in the present, and forget that there's still a future that we have to tend to. Right. That we have to nourish, that we have to cultivate. You know, my pastor, man, Robert Burgett, right there at Powerhouse Katy, he always tells us, man, water the garden. You got to water the garden. So for those that are following in our footsteps, you know, we have to reach back and we have to show them. And that's what, you know, during the early 90s, brothers weren't doing that. You
Right.
know,
Yeah.
they weren't doing that. So, you know, I took the initiative, man, to come home. I could have came home and plugged in and got a whole 18-wheeler, you know, and went straight to work and put the streets to work. But that's not how I'm doing it. You know, I'm out here touring these schools in HISD, giving my testimony at churches, working with brothers like you that are giving back to the community, and you know that's what we need. We need a full court press right now. There's no reason why, you know, we should wake up tomorrow and another 14, 15-year-old man gets smoked, gets killed. It shouldn't be that way. You know,
That's true.
we have to give. Houston is better than this. You know, I dealt with Kamaya Donaldson. You know, we did the 5-year-old who got shot by the stray bullet, man, out there in the Southwest area. You know, we did their benefit, and you know her family is, you know, her mother. They're from a different state. You know, so they move over here because they want a better life.
Right.
And her 5-year-old daughter, man, gets smoked. H-Town, we're better than that.
Yeah.
You know, Houston, we're better than that. That's my message to everybody out here in the community. We're better than that, man. You know, we created it, we started it, our own culture that has gone global. You know, so we shouldn't stop right there. We should show people, man, that you know we have the building blocks, we have the stepping stones, we have the ability to where at regardless at what level an individual is at in terms of negativity, that we got the resources and the services available to help them get out that situation.
Right.
You know,
Man, you were telling me a little earlier. You were gonna be working on a book.
yeah,
Or
yeah.
What?
I got a couple of books that I've written already. We haven't published them.
Right.
I got the G Code Manifesto,
Man.
which is just straight game that we got, man, for brothers on the street in the front line.
Right.
It's the G Code Manifesto. We got I got my personal autobiography, which is 2 volumes. It's a Mind of a Gangster, a true story of pain and power. We got the Pain volume, which consists of the consequences, you know, of that particular culture, the gang culture, the drug culture, you know, the criminal culture. And then we have the Power volume, which is God's transformative power of how he's been working in my life, you know.
Wow.
So it's 2 volumes. You know, we got some other stuff in the making, my documentary. I got Pastor Richard Vega over there at CT Church Alameda. He's working on a movie deal with me right now with some producers in Hollywood.
Wow.
Trying to get all that started. We got you know, I got the Magic Hand murals going on. We got the 311 Studios. Well, since day one at Shadow the OG,
Right.
Manic Media, and then me, Magic Hand Murals. You know, we work under the 311 Studio umbrella.
Y'all are working for real.
Yeah, we just
with all
trying to
that.
put it in, man, and
Yeah.
then making our rounds, man, and just, you know, my whole thing is to educate the masses
Right.
about the consequences, you know, of this negative lifestyle that we live, man. I never thought I'd live to be 50. I went to prison as a young man, as a boy, basically,
Right.
and had to come home as a man. You know, my greatest feat right now, the crowns that I carry, is being a father and being a husband. You know, those are my greatest feats right there. Those are my greatest accomplishments right there. You know, I want to be a pillar to my community. You know, I believe in making amends, and I believe in a life of restitution. I don't make no excuses nor minimize the things that I used to do.
Right.
Okay, I don't do that. I accept full responsibility. I paid with almost 30 years of my life in prison, and you know, I don't try to minimize it. But who I am today is not based on my past. It's based on my present and my future. Right. You know, I had brothers, man, that rode with me my whole incarceration, man. And they got out and they kept my spirits up. They gave me the fuel that I needed to stay motivated, you know. Matter of fact, big shout out to Ricky Chavez too from H-Town. He was there for me every step of the way as well. You know, it's just so many names, man, that you know, I couldn't give every name possible. You know, people like Diane Reyes and her mother Martha Reyes, they were there for me, you know, because, you know, they were the people that God put in my life at particular seasons that took me through it.
Right.
You know, I come home at night, man, and sometimes I think it's not real. You know, I work right here at City Hall in the Annex building. You know, I come to work every day, man. I wake up in the morning, I pray with my wife, I pray with our daughter, you know, and I come to work and I'm out here in the city, and I think that, you know, at sometimes I'm not deserving of it.
Wow.
But, you know, I'm always reminded, you know.
Did you ever
that-
see yourself doing something like this when you were locked up? Like, did you ever feel like, man, this is this was something possible. Because man, since you've been out, bro, you've turned a lot of stuff around, and you being in the position you're in right now is like is motivating to myself, a lot of people, man. I mean,
I just want people to know, man, that we all got a God-given purpose.
right,
We all have the ability to overcome, but we can't do it by ourselves.
right,
We have to be willing to put aside our differences. We have to put, whatever political differences we may have, religious differences we may have, neighborhood differences we may have, and it falls on the hands of, some of the OGs in these different neighborhoods, man.
Right.
You have to separate our differences. People at the city level, the administrative level, they have to understand that we all have a seat at the table if we're doing the right thing, if we're willing to make a positive difference. I never thought that I had a seat at the table. I never thought that my voice had any merit, any value, but when I became serious about my commitment, about bringing about positive change, then I knew that there was people out there that were willing to listen to me. Right. There were people out there that were willing to extend, that right hand of fellowship and say, okay, well, you want a seat at the table? Well, you got to bring something. Don't just complain about it. Right. Be the change that you desire. I can sit here and complain all day long about my social and economic situation growing up.
Right.
I can do that all day long. But it's up to me to make that change.
Right.
Because it starts individually, and that's how the collective effort comes about. I didn't have a father, so I try to be the best father figure I can possibly be to my daughter. My mother, she didn't have a husband, so I try to be the best husband I can possibly be to my wife. I never had no true friend that truly believed in my potential, so I try to be that friend, that mentor, right. To help guide and lead some of these individuals that I have within my sphere of influence. And we all have a sphere of influence. We all have the ability to touch people's hearts and their minds and help guide them. But yeah, at the end of the day, it's a matter of personal responsibility. But it's up to us, to those of us that know, that are mature enough to know, to put forth that effort. We can't just sit back and act as though it's, complain all day long about this isn't going right and that's not going right. I didn't have this, I didn't have that. We can't play the mm-hmm. victim role or the blame game. We have to stand up, step out, and be accounted for.
Right. Man, what would you say about the importance of I would say, anybody just with church in general? Church is something that I've seen a lot of artists, a lot of my young Latinos out there, hip hop artists. I'm starting to see a lot of them going to church now more often in today's time, 2022. Like it's been kind of something that they're all kind of getting into now, which of course I'm happy about. What would you say the importance though, when it comes to getting closer to a church, or like yourself having a pastor, someone that you're like a mentor towards?
It's very vital. It's
right.
very vital, because everything that we see is temporal.
Right.
Let's be honest. We're just on a ball floating in the air, right?
Right.
That's it. We're just on a ball floating on the air. How did we get here? What's going on? Those are real in-depth questions, for a later date. But it's really important, man, that, spiritual renewal.
Right.
I'm a devout Christian,
like
but spiritual renewal is very important, whether it's Islam, Judaism, New Americans, whatever it may be. Spiritual renewal is very, very important. I believe, based on, my personal spiritual belief system, is that we were created with a mind, body, and a spirit. We're a threefold being. So it's very important to have that relationship. So, shout out to brothers like Lil Lucky, Luciano, Brian Trejo, all these other brothers, CJ Santiago, these brothers that are out here putting in work for the church, for the kingdom. But you can do it as well at the mosque, the synagogue, wherever it may be. You can still put in that work. Right. But I'm a firm believer that you have to have that spiritual renewal. You have to have that connection with that higher power. And like I said, I'm a Christian. I'm an unapologetic Christian. I believe in the death, burial, and resurrection of Jesus Christ, man, and I'm not ashamed of it.
Right.
And if people ask, I'm going to let them know. And if they want to know from a distance, I'm going to let my actions validate who I am in terms of my relationship with Jesus.
Man. Bro, it's been the realest interview that we've had on Hustletown Live, man, on Hustletown Network in general. Sambo, I'm glad you were able to come tap in with me. I definitely got to have you come back and even talk more, because I could talk all day about what we're talking about right here, and it's something I definitely want to hear. Want to have all my artists tune into and listen. Again, if you're out there, share this video, share this interview. Shout out to everybody who's been tapped in right now, man. Sambo's doing big things for the city right now, and it's not gonna stop. Let them know any of the last stuff you got going on. I know you got a lot of stuff going on, but let's revisit some of the stuff going on for 2023 for Sambo. Your goals for the rest of pretty much while you're out here, man. Give us some more. Give us some last words on that for everybody out there watching.
Well, my main goal is to be the best man of God that I can possibly be, to be that example, first and foremost. Secondary is to be the best husband and best father in the world that I can possibly be. And outside of that, get out here and continue to share the message, continue to work with the department heads that I'm working with, and touch as many kids that we can possibly touch. In terms of business and the books and the documentaries and the movies, all that stuff is coming.
Right.
Everything is coming, but I have to start laying the foundation first. Sometimes we get ahead of ourselves and we don't lay a solid foundation. So we don't have a solid foundation, so we can't solidify our structure, right?
Right.
So the first storm that comes our way, what happens? We give up.
Yeah.
So, those are my goals for, this year, is to touch as many lives that I can possibly touch, first and foremost inside of my home, but outside of it as well, to let these brothers know that are out here on the front line that they have the potential to be more than what they are today for tomorrow, because it's about the legacy, it's about the longevity. It's not about dying before your time or balling until you fall. It's about living out your life to the fullest with your God-given potential and your God-given purpose.
Man, where can they stay tapped in with you, man? If they're not following you yet on social media and they want to check you out, because I see some of the stuff you post also online. You post a lot of motivational stuff. I want them to follow you. Where can they do that at? I know you on social media and all that, Facebook. Where you at?
Well, I'm on Facebook right now, Hplex Hardware.
Okay.
On Hplex Hardware, that's where I'm at right now. And then, I like to take everything in piecemeal.
Right.
Because I want everything to be as solid as possible. So I've been functioning on Facebook right now on Hplex Hardware, but we're going to carry it over into the Instagram and then the TikTok. And, I'm dealing with Manic Media right now, and we're trying to put some pieces together so we can do visuals, and we got an album that we're dropping right now, strictly motivational speeches that I'm doing.
Nice.
It's going to be like an audio book called the G Code Manifesto. And we're just putting it all together, but right now it's Hplex Hardware, because I want to solidify that foundation. I don't believe that you have to rush. I believe over quality, over quantity any days, because some of the things that we do in that capacity are timeless. They're classics. Yeah. So I want the things that I'm sharing, the jewels that I'm dropping, to last far beyond, my life expectancy. Yeah. I want them to be eternal. I want people to be able to say, hey man, this brother gave me something that was tangible, something that was real, something that I can hold on to and run with it. Right. That inspiration, that motivation. It doesn't matter where they're at in life, what they're doing. If they take it and they run with it, they apply it to their personal goals and their ambitions, man. I just want to be a part of that took them to that next level, that kept them away from the penitentiary or kept them away from an early grave.
That's real, man. Sambo, I appreciate you tapping in with me, my brother. Like I said, we definitely got to have you come back, chop it up more. Of course, anything you're involved in, man, tap in with me. You know how we do. You know how we rock. I support everything you're out here doing, brother.
Anything for the kids. That's my motto.
There you go.
Anything for the kids, man. Keep them out the early grave. Keep them out of prison. Anything for the kids. And I commend you as well for the things that you're doing for the community as well, man, because you're out here on the front line and you're doing the same thing in your capacity. Yes, sir. So I commend you for that as well, man. And it's been a blessing to chop it up with you tonight, too.
Thank you, my brother. I appreciate it, man. Again, follow Sambo on Facebook. It's Hplex space Hardware, correct? Right. So you go look him up, man. Go follow him, tap in, man. You got any questions or anything, man, any advice? Sambo is definitely out here and, he's spreading his positivity around the city, really going to be all over the nation right here, man. So stay tapped in with him. I can't wait to see all the further work, man, the documentary stuff, everything y'all working on. We'll shout out everybody up. Man, y'all just working. So I'm excited, brother, and salute right here from the world-famous Compound Films in downtown H-Town. It's your boy Infamous Tex and Sambo, and we out, baby.
The Hustletown Network, straight out of Texas. The hottest independent artists in the Lone Star State, swagging and banging through the Third Coast. in the Hustletown Network anytime, 24/7.